Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Training for Triathlon. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how I'm structuring my resistance training whilst training for my first ever triathlon, which is a half Ironman this summer. Now, being heavily endurance focused, I have typically struggled with gaining strength and gaining muscle. And as I continue to study sports science and learn about my own training, I realised this is probably down to a number of factors, such as nutrition, recovery, and in particular, my training periodization. Now, currently, I am swimming, cycling, and running 3 times a week, which is a lot of volume and equates to almost about 10 hours of training. Now, I know doing this much endurance training certainly isn't optimal for building the most amount of muscle and being as strong as possible. However, I believe resistance training can still be really important for performance. And I certainly still think you can get stronger and build muscle whilst doing this amount of volume. This is provided that the correct volume and intensity of resistance training is applied. Now, periodization. This is the planned manipulation of training variables in order to maximize adaptations and prevent overtraining. Now, most recently, my endurance training is the most structured it has ever been, which you kind of need when you're cycling, swimming, and running 3 times a week each. So I've had really well planned workouts week in advance with structured intensities, durations. So I know when I'm supposed to be working in certain thresholds or when it's a zone 2 day. And after sticking to this pretty consistently, I've seen some brilliant improvements. And for the first time in a while, I actually feel like I'm adapting to the training that I'm doing when I incorporate weeks of lower volume and intensity to allow the fatigue to dissipate. On the other hand, my resistance training has never really been this structured. Yes, I have certain workouts I wanted to do and I pick my weekly split, but I've never really, like I say, periodized this. I've never looked over the weeks and months and how I want to progress. It's more of a, this is what my weekly split is. These are the exercises I'm going to do. These are the reps I want to kind of achieve, and I'm going to try and add load. And whilst that does work for a couple of weeks, I typically find my strength then plateaus and overall progress stops. Like I say, as I continue to study sports science and develop my own training, I realise this is by far from optimal, and structuring my resistance training in this way is giving me suboptimal results, and therefore I'm seeing very little to no progress. So now I'm going to take a more structured approach to my training and hopefully see further improvements and overcome these recent plateaus. And so I'm going to tell you exactly how I'm doing this. Firstly, I do want to say periodization is a term and it's not a structured way of training, it's just a principle. And there are many ways to utilize the theory of periodization. In particular, I'm going to be utilizing undulating periodization, which is where volume and intensity fluctuate on a weekly basis. So because of this, I'm going to separate my training into 3 weeks where I'll focus on a specific performance outcome. The first being hypertrophy, which is basically the increase in muscular size. The second week will focus on strength, and this will ultimately improve my ability to produce force. And then the final week, the third week of training, will be focused on power, which is where I can utilize this force, but as quickly as possible in explosive type movements. So for week 1 being hypertrophy, I'm going to be focusing on the 8 to 12 rep range in my compound movements with moderate loads and about 90 seconds rest. And for accessory movements, I'll be working in the 12 to 15 rep range with also 90 seconds rest. Week 2, the focus will shift to strength, where I'll be working with heavier weights and lower rep ranges, specifically 3 to 6 reps for compound movements and 7 to 10 for accessory type movements, and the rest periods here will be about 120 to 180 seconds. And finally, week 3 will therefore target power. So for the compound movements here, I'll be working at lighter loads of around 50% of my 1 rep max and focusing on moving these weights as quickly and explosively as possible. So nowhere near really muscular failure. Because I'm trying to move these weights as quickly as possible, I will typically be recruiting type 2 muscle fibers, the fast twitch fibers that typically get overlooked from all the endurance training that I'm doing. During this power phase, the accessory movements won't be done in the same manner. They'll be done in a very high rep range of 15 to 20 reps with very short rest periods of around 60 seconds to induce that kind of metabolic stress on the muscle, which is another way of potentially increasing muscular size. So each week I'll progress from hypertrophy to strength to power, and that'll be a 3-block week of training. I plan to complete this 2 to 3 times depending on current fatigue levels, and then when I do decide fatigue is too high, I'll then complete a week of deload training to allow recovery and adaptation to occur. I also want to note that throughout this plan, I will be taking most of my sets close to failure, as that's kind of what you need to actually challenge the muscle. However, I will also be periodizing this. I'll be utilizing something called reps in reserve, which is what it says on the tin. It's the amount of reps you feel that you have left. So I will gradually progress this throughout the cycle. So the first 3-week block, I'll be working in reps in reserve, also known as RIR, of 2. So I've got 2 reps in the tank left in me. The second block will then be 1 reps in reserve. And then if I do progress to a final block, I will take the last set of every exercise to 0 or to failure. Doing it in this manner means I prevent any overtraining and just general fatigue that comes with training to failure. Like I say, I will be performing endurance training on top of this, and so that is always priority. And the neural fatigue that you can get from resistance training, I don't want to compromise endurance. So this is kind of a way I'm trying to manage it. And then obviously incorporating a deload after that last week as well, just to allow recovery and adaptation as well. Another thing I also want to note is the power training, the compound movements will not be taken anywhere near failure. Obviously I'm working at 50% tops of my 1 rep max for the compound movements, just focusing on moving that weight quick and explosively. So that is obviously going to induce less muscle damage than the hypertrophy and the strength week. So it is kind of a bit of a deload week in a way, but obviously still providing some benefit. And then the accessory movements will be taken close to failure within the desired reps in reserve range that I've specified for that week. So still not a full complete recovery, and still getting some hopefully adaptation there. Now to get onto the individual sessions of the week, like I say, I am swimming, cycling and running 3 times a week each. It is a lot of volume, and so I have to be careful how I plan these strength sessions, because ultimately you're breaking your muscles down when you do that. Throughout endurance training as well, there's damage involved, so you've got to be really careful. I've got to obviously make sure nutrition and recovery is on top so I can perform in these sessions as well. So it is complicated when you're balancing endurance and resistance training, but like I say, I believe it can be done, and this is how I'm structuring it. So I'm going to be doing resistance training just 3 times a week. In the past, I've done crazy 5-6 day splits, and yeah, it might work for a little bit, but I often run into overtraining or at least overreaching. And so I think a 3-day split with my current training volume is more than enough. I might even some weeks just do 2 days of an upper, lower, or maybe 2 full body sessions. The main thing I'm trying to get is hitting the muscle group twice a week and kind of spreading out that volume across the week, so I'm not getting too sore and it's impacting my endurance sessions, because they are priority at the minute. So the 3-day split I'll be doing is a full body, an upper body and a lower body session. Mondays will be my upper body day, where my exercises will be as follows: a trap bar deadlift, military press, reverse barbell lunge, an incline barbell bench press, a lat pull down, and then some additional core work on top of that. Thursdays will be my lower body day, consisting of hack squats, line hamstring curls, and then some hip adductor and abductor work, as well as additional mobility and other strengthening and injury prevention exercises to complement my running and cycling and swimming as well. The last session of the week will take place on Friday, and it's the big upper body session. The exercises for these will be bent over barbell row, flat dumbbell bench press, chin-ups, some seated cable flies, overhead triceps extensions, machine preacher curls, and to finish, a nice superset of the cable ab crunch and some super range of motion lateral raises for the side delts. So this is my plan. Those are the workouts. As the weeks progress, I will look to obviously add loads, reps, and potentially sets within the target range for that week. I'm excited to see what taking this approach will have on my strength and whether I do see improvements and can overcome the recent plateaus I've been experiencing. Like I say, I know doing this amount of endurance training will hinder somewhat the benefit I could get, but I think this is an appropriate volume and intensity to incorporate. I know if I cut out all my endurance training, then I could maybe go to the gym 5-6 days a week and I could push more volume on these sessions, but obviously I'm working at a lower volume because I've got volume elsewhere in my endurance training. So rather than trying to combine two programs together and put 200% of effort in, working out a compromise solution between the two is something that I'm trying to achieve. It takes a lot of trial and error and listening to your body. But yeah, this is what I'm trying for this next phase of my training. I also want to add that the way I've structured these sessions in the week are to consolidate stressors, so to say. So lower body days will typically be done when I have a hard, high intensity lower body session. So whether that's high intensity intervals on the bike or interval running, whenever my body is under significant amount of lower body stress is typically when I'll incorporate that lower body session. Like I say, just to consolidate stressors. Yes, I might be a bit fatigued for the strength session, but if I then go and add that in later in the week when maybe I'm a little bit fresh, then my endurance training will suffer. And at the minute, my endurance training is priority. So that's how I'm structuring it. Likewise for the upper body session, if I have a hard swim, that's when then in the afternoon I'll go and hit my upper body session. I do want to obviously state the importance of recovery, sleep, nutrition as well. So make sure I'm eating enough is obviously the fundamental, the key thing, but also protein intake of upwards of 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is about 132 grams of protein for me. That's what I'm going to be aiming for consistently on a daily basis as well. So that's my plan. Again, excited to document this and hopefully in the next 3, 6, 9 weeks I'll be able to show you the improvements I've had on my lifts at the gym, and hopefully this will have also benefited my endurance training as well. Let me know if you have any suggestions to this training plan and what you do differently or any advice you recommend for me, and as always, thank you for watching.